Think about our earliest ancestors. Before we had technology, weapons of any kind, in order to survive, we had to stay in packs.
Mhm.
What happened to the individual who got separated from the pack?
They died.
Most likely, they were out in the open, all alone, without a weapon, and all these eyes of predators looking at them. And usually they did die. What is public speaking? Being alone, without a weapon, out in the open, and all these eyes looking at you.
Hi, Michael.
Hi, Patty.
How are
Great
you?
to be with you today. I'm doing very well, thank you.
Yes, good to be with you too. And thank you so much for joining me on the Break Time with Patty show. My dear.
Any chance to talk about speaking and storytelling? I'm in.
Yes, that's exactly how I feel. So passionate about public speaking. And we share that 100%.
Yes.
Dear friend, let me introduce Michael Davis to you right away before we get started. Number one, Michael is a world-class speaker. He has been studying the art of public speaking and storytelling for 2 decades. You heard right, 2 decades. He has been featured in top corporate firms as a keynote speaker, including General Electric, Johnson & Johnson, the Ohio Association of Community Health Centers, and the Cincinnati Human Resource Association, just to name a few. He's also been a guest on many podcasts, like The Business of Story, Speaker Match Radio, Speaking of Wealth, and he's a regular on the Unforgettable Presentations podcast, one of my favorite ones, with Darren Lacroix and Mark Brown. Number two, Mike is also a world-class speaking coach. He is a founder of Speaking CPR, as you can see in his background, which helps thousands of entrepreneurs, managers, and sales professionals and business leaders communicate with more confidence, impact, and influence. He offers workshops and high-impact speech, storytelling training, TEDx talk coaching. He has been a coach with Cincinnati TEDx since 2015 and is a faculty member of the online Stage Time University. Number three, he is also an author, an amazing one at that. He wrote the book on storytelling and the Kindle book series Sell More with Stories. He's a contributing author to 3 public speaking books, as well as the book Living a Wealthy Life. And he shares amazing and valuable content with his newsletter on LinkedIn called Speak to Influence and Persuade. Whatever you do, sign up. You want to receive those newsletters or follow him on LinkedIn. And finally, number 4, Mike is a family man who lives in Ohio, USA, with his loved ones and the captain of the ship, Sky, his Chihuahua. I have talked enough. Michael, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself as a young boy, a teenager, and a young adult? What was it like to be in his shoes?
Well, I was born in France, which means I absolutely love when you said the word entrepreneur.
Oh, yeah.
Now, I wasn't raised in France. I think you can tell by my accent. I was a baby when we came to the States. But I grew up as an only child, although my father left when I was 2. My mom remarried. He's my dad, great dad, couldn't be happier the way it turned out. But I do have a half brother that's 21 years younger than me that I met when I was an adult. It wasn't your typical upbringing, but was raised as an only child. Great parents. I still have them. I'm blessed to have them still. Grew up focused on sports. That was my life. But I did love to read, and I was pretty good in school. So I've always loved storytelling. And when I eventually got into this world of speaking and storytelling, that was I think back to where some of those seeds were planted. I've always loved reading stories, movies. So I have roots in storytelling.
Yes, me too. I could read. I would forget to eat and sleep if I got a book in my hands. So I totally relate with what you just said.
Yes.
So would you say that you were like a shy boy or were you comfortable as a young man?
You know, I was shy I like to entertain people.
Okay.
In fact, the reason that I'm involved in public speaking training today is because of a incident in first grade. It started on a desk. One day during indoor recess, I got bored. So I jumped on top of my desk. And I'm up there and I'm dancing, and I'm singing, I'm telling jokes to my friends, and we were having a ball until teacher walked back in the room. And she walked over to me and she said, well, since you love standing on your desk so much, I'm going to let you do it during nap time so everybody can see you. Okay. None of the kids slept that day. They were too preoccupied with my humiliation. I stood up there and I looked down at them, Patty, and they looked up at me. Hey, he looks really stupid. Worst experience of my young life. So when my teacher said, get down, I hope you've learned your lesson. Oh, I did. First words I said to myself were, never stand in front of people ever again. And for 25 years, I didn't. I mean, I fought it unless I was forced to through work. And then one day, when I was 31 years old, my boss sat me down in my office. He handed me a stack of papers because at the time I was a certified financial planner. And part of my job, ironically, was to go out and give workshops about retirement planning. So my boss hands me this stack of papers and he said, don't even bother reading it. Your public speaking skills are awful. Fix this or you're finished here. That was it. That was my entry into the speaking world because I was forced to. And it was through that process I also uncovered that traumatic experience as a 6-year-old and some other lessons that kept me from being in front of audiences. I don't like the words introvert and extrovert, but I was very comfortable by myself. And that sowed some of the seeds to say, well, don't get in front of people. I had a lot to overcome to become a speaker and author and what I do now.
Wow. So you were tortured into public speaking.
That's one way of putting it, yes. A strong word. Yeah, it was. Look, we all have what we would label traumatic events as children, and that one, it really held me back. And I regret that one incident from a heartless teacher kept me from wanting to be in front of people. You never know what I would have done, but we've all had those.
Yes.
And it's one of the reasons I do what I do today. I know the pain of regret. I know the pain of humiliation, and I want to help people get past that because there are too many good ideas out there in the world that need to be shared.
Yes, absolutely. Too many voices need to be heard.
Absolutely, they do.
So at that point then, so you're forced by your boss, like do something, or I don't know, perhaps it seemed like he was prepared to like fire you. Do something, fix it. What was the turning point? Oh, so that was the turning point. So how did you go from that threat, impending threat, to visiting a Toastmasters club for the first time then?
That was it. Out of sheer desperation, I looked, I made some phone calls. This is back in the 90s, so there's no access to Google or anything like that. And a friend of mine suggested this group called Toastmasters. Great, whatever, I'll go. And I knew right away I felt comfortable. It felt like being at home, even though it was all centered around an activity that scared me to death. I had this intuitive sense that I'll be okay here. And it was, first few months, I was scared. I mean, every time I stood up, I had that knot in the stomach and, oh my gosh, I'm never going to survive this. But with time and repetition, it got a lot better.
Yes.
And it was also through that I uncovered the memory of the desk. See, I had buried that. I hadn't even thought about it for 25 years. And then through my work with Toastmasters and eventually the National Speakers Association, I started to embrace these issues and these activities that had occurred when I was a kid that scared me away from speaking. And I also understood being with like-minded people. Oh, I'm not the only one who's gone through something like that. Huge revelation. Oh,
yes.
Yeah.
Apparently, statistics say that 77% of humans suffer from the fear of public speaking. And it's huge. And I suspect it's even higher than that, but that's what the research shows. So it's really, really huge.
Well, Patty, there's a theory on that I believe. It's you're never going to prove it with research, but I love the theory. And it was written by a man named Scott Birken, who wrote the book Confessions of a Public Speaker.
Oh.
Highly recommend the book. It's really entertaining, insightful. He suggested that think about our earliest ancestors. Before we had technology, weapons of any kind, in order to survive, we had to stay in packs.
Mm-hmm.
What happened to the individual who got separated from the pack?
They died.
Most likely, they were out in the open, all alone, without a weapon, and all these eyes of predators looking at them. And usually they did die. What is public speaking? Being alone, without a weapon, out in the open, and all these eyes looking at you. Mm. He makes the suggestion that we are wired, I know that's not the right word, but in our body, somewhere in our subconscious, we get the message, oh my gosh, you're alone, you're going to get eaten. Mm-hmm. Now, fortunately, we now have a higher brain that tells us, wait a minute, the people sitting in front of you are eating lunch. They're not going to eat you. Right? Secondly, they're really busy today. They've got so much going on. They could have been 100 other places than here. They don't want to watch you fail. They're not there to stone you. They want you to do well because it benefits them. So, yeah, we are wired, I think, to be afraid of it. But we also have tools and techniques to overcome that wiring.
And that's where Speaking CPR comes in.
Yes, we want to give life to your speeches and presentations.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm just curious, how long did it take for you to do your icebreaker? Like the first speech when you joined Toastmasters? I
jumped in right away. Yeah. Because, again, I had this threat of losing my job. And I said, I knew I was scared. I hadn't uncovered why yet, but I got to fix this. Let's go. Let's get in. I'll go into this Toastmasters thing for 6 months and I'll fix this problem and be on my way. Yeah. And here I am 28 years later. But, yeah, it took me less than a month. And I remember the icebreaker for 2 reasons. Mm-hmm. I remember the title of my speech, One Lucky Guy. And I remember going to the front of the room, putting my hands on the lectern and white knuckling it the whole time. I mean, I walked away and it was like I held my breath for 6 minutes and gave that first speech. And all right, thanks. I'm done. So those are the 2 things I remember, but it was a starting point.
Yes. And it's funny, once you get it done, everything else becomes easier after. I'm not how to explain it, but like it's the hardest to me too. I was terrified. Actually, I gave my icebreaker the day before I became an official member. Like I knew, like I did every role every week. I really went all in. But yes, once that was done, it was like everything was just followed for me.
Yeah.
And then,
you know, the most important part of the icebreaker for me, Patty, was a piece of advice I got. Mm-hmm. And I'll never forget, I'm still in contact with Sharon today. Her name's Sharon Nolan. Okay. She was my first evaluator. And she said, you've got a lot of potential. Mm-hmm. You're really nervous. And you just got to keep working on, you got to get over those nerves and you'll get more comfortable. And I said, well, how do you do that? And she said, this is the wisest piece of advice I ever got first day in Toastmasters. Mm-hmm. Keep getting up and speaking.
Yes.
That's it. There's nothing fancy or extraordinary about that wisdom. It's like every other skill we learn in life, every obstacle we face, keep getting up and doing it. It will get better.
Yes. Oh, yes. Sharon, you're right on.
And
yes. Sheila, you say?
Sharon.
Sharon, yes.
Yeah.
And we need cheerleaders, and there's so many amazing people that give us feedback in Toastmasters and also outside, people like yourself, for instance. So actually that brings me to my next question. How did you go from being a certified financial planner to being the founder of Speaking CPR? Like, what made you want to change the playing fields?
Well, it was the initial threat from my boss, fix this or you're finished here. That was the scare that got me into speaking. It was through Toastmasters and then a few years later, the National Speakers Association. I began to see what speaking really was. It wasn't just a way to save my job. It was an art form. It's a skill, and it's a critical skill in a time. The last 30 years have been very transitional for the human race, where all this technology is coming in. And the ability to clearly communicate an idea will help you separate yourself from competitors and make you stand out in your field. I didn't realize it over time. I was really developing this deep love for speaking and storytelling. There was a day, though, when I knew that I needed to change careers. I was on the phone with a mutual fund salesperson. And if you're watching this, if you've ever dealt with a mutual fund salesperson, I bless them for the work they do, but they all sound the same. And I'll never forget, Patty, I'm on the phone like this, and I'm just listening to it, and I'm thinking, oh, God, I've heard this before. And I happen to look over at my bookcase. I started counting the number of books. 52, okay. Here was the revelation. 50 of those books were about public speaking and storytelling, and 2 were about financial planning. And I thought, oh, my bookcase is telling me something. And that's when I started to make this plan to say, okay, I need to transition out of financial planning, which I liked. It was a good career, made good income from it, but I wasn't thrilled. In that kind of role, you can't stay in it for 2 reasons. Number one, you're not living your purpose. Second, you're not best serving your clients. Yes. I did a really good job for them, but I wasn't passionate and 100% committed. Okay. And I knew that wasn't right. So I started to make this 3-year plan, which turned out to be an 8-year plan, which eventually got me out. But I started this company in 2011 part-time. When I say part-time, I talk 2 hours a week was all I could give it. But slowly, I started to give it more and more time. I got certified as a coach, wrote the first book, and just got more involved. And then eventually, Darren LaCroix brought me into Stage Time University as one of the coaches and the host of the weekly calls that we do. And it was being exposed to all of those world champions and highly successful professionals that changed everything for me.
Yes. Wow. This is a unbelievable, beautiful story, actually, that you just followed your heart, basically. It sounds to me like
my gut said, you're not doing what you should be doing.
And most people don't follow that. They just stay with reason. No, this is what I know. And so I find it very brave what you did.
I appreciate that. And not only was I surrounding myself with terrific mentors in the speaking world, my parents, even though Dad was a school teacher, they were both entrepreneurs. Okay. My mom ran her own tailoring business for 25 years. They owned some other businesses together. So I was around entrepreneurs most of my life. And I knew I worked the corporate world for 9 months because I knew I couldn't do 10. I said, there's no way. I will not make it another 30 days in this world. It just drove me insane. I said, I will sink or swim on my own. As an entrepreneur. You don't do it by yourself. But there's no way I was going to work in the corporate world. I just couldn't do it.
Oh. And can you tell us a little bit about the services that you offer in Speaking CPR, just for our...
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a professional speaker myself. I also work with my training programs. I work with individuals and groups to help them in 3 ways. Number one is to create the proper mindset about speaking. To what we were talking about earlier, people have a natural fear. And if you pile on top of that some experiences like standing on a desk and being humiliated, that creates a negative mindset. So we work on that first. Some people we have to do a little bit more intense work. Others, we give them some tricks they can use, some exercises, and some questions to ask themselves right before they speak. That makes a big difference. Second, we work on the material itself. The biggest problem I see with people is they don't understand the power of their own stories, so we help them uncover those. They also tend to put way too much information into their talks. People today are already bombarded with information. They don't need information from you. I can get more information than you or any other speaker can give me with this device right here. So what I need is your perspective on your topic. So that's what we help people formulate through stories, some research, proof, if you will, of the assertions you're making. And then the third, which has changed the most, the third part of the coaching is how do you deliver in a dynamic style that captures your audience and keeps their attention? Pre-2020, most of it was working on live presenting in front of an in-person audience. Then it shifted to live presenting in front of a virtual audience. And now what we're seeing, and it's funny because when you and I met virtually at that meeting a couple of months ago, that was an eye-opening experience for me. And I don't think I shared this with you, Patty. You were on this monitor at the far end of the room. And if you recall, there were these rectangular tables. Speakers were on this end, and in the middle of the room was this owl camera. So what I was doing sitting on the side, I watched all the speakers before me, and tell me if you agree with this experience. The speakers were speaking to the individuals in the room, and then occasionally they'd look back at all of you on the monitor, and then they'd come back to the live monitor, and they kept doing this. And I noticed at no point did any one of them look at the camera. They weren't making the connection. And I'm bringing this up because for 2 years we help people look into the camera when you're in your home office. We got that down pretty well. What's happening, though, is people are going back to the in-person environment and they're forgetting there's a camera there. They're going right back to the in-person audience and they're ignoring the most important element in the room, which is the camera. And now some people have pushed back on me when I say it's the most important element. Here's why I say that. I'm not making the case that the people online are more important than the person sitting in front of you. That's not my point. If you go to these larger events with many people in the room, there are usually 2 screens on stage, right?
Yes.
Where is the audience typically looking? The audience in the room, where are they looking?
They're looking at the screen.
Looking at the screen, right? We are conditioned to look at screens. My generation grew up on TV, screen. My sons grew up on computers, and younger kids are growing up on these things. We are like Pavlov's dog. We're looking at screens. So when you're on stage and there are screens, you've got to know where the camera is.
Yes.
Because if you're not talking to the camera, this is all people are seeing of you the whole time. And that does not connect you to an audience.
Wow, that's brilliant.
It is a new habit we have to establish. It's been a major transformation in delivery just in 30 months. Well, not even 30 months. I mean, 26 months time where people have had to shift and shift and shift. And now new habit in place.
Wow. Yes, I had read that in your newsletter, but you explaining it this way, it's making it even clearer to me. Yes.
I actually need to do a video of it. I realized after I wrote that blog, you really should do a video to demonstrate what this is, because reading about it, you're writing about a virtual experience. So, yeah, I'll do one.
Yes. There you go. You do that. I'll watch it.
You inspire me to create the video.
Woo, great. I served the purpose today. So I'm just curious, actually, do you ever miss any element of your old life, your old financial planner life? Is there anything in there that you miss?
Not one bit. I like the people I worked with, but no, I don't.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Very good.
Straightforward answer.
Yes. Short and sweet. That answers it. Perfect. Good to know. So I'm sure that you hear that often, and I'm going to ask you this because I'm really curious to hear what you think about this. When someone tells you, Michael, I don't have any interesting stories to share, what do you say to them?
Yeah, I knew you were going to ask this, and I really gave this some thought, Patty. And here's what people are really saying. They're not saying I don't have any stories. What they really mean by that is, I've done nothing exciting or newsworthy. Why would anybody want to listen to me? That's what they really are thinking. And I don't even think it's a conscious thought. That's what their perspective is. Well, I'm not an Olympic athlete. I haven't done anything famous. I haven't won a Nobel Prize. Why me? And that's exactly why you. Because the people who have climbed the highest mountains, who have sailed all the different oceans and won medals and gone through major catastrophic illness, their stories are inspirational. However, the majority of speakers who tell those stories never really connect with their audience. It's entertaining in the moment, and then you leave and you go about your day. The speakers that resonate the deepest are the ones who share common problems that you and I have. And that's one of the strengths of the world champions that I've worked with. Their stories were so simple. And when I say simple, I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean that positively. The simple. Darren LaCroix. Yes, he's a dear friend. He's a mentor for 20 years. I contend his speech may be the greatest Toastmasters championship speech ever because he demonstrated, didn't just talk about it, demonstrated when we fall down in life, which we all do we choose to stay down? Get up. Simple message. And some people, look, there are always critics out there. Some people have criticized that speech. Well, I've heard that whole story before. Okay, tell me, how do you handle it when you fall down? Are you demonstrating what Darren talked about? Simple message. And that's why we need to simplify what we're saying. This is a big challenge I have when I work with folks, is their message is lost. I'm not clear on what it is. And they complicate it. It's like going through this maze when for the audience it should be a straight line. We're going to start here and we're going to end up here. And we're not going to take this curvy road to get there. It's going to be like this. So that when they walk away, they've got it. And this is how they can make their lives a little bit better.
Wow. Yes, you're right. It can, simple is better. And actually, can you share just, I know that you find simple stories, but how do you find your stories and your themes in your day-to-day? Just give us an example for somebody that doesn't.
You know, you and I met that day a couple months ago, and I was working on a brand new story of a memory that had popped into my head, a lesson I learned as a little boy about why I shouldn't play around mom's ironing board. Right? Mom's she's a seamstress, and even when I was a little boy and we lived in a small apartment, I was obsessed with her ironing board, and she would tell me, Michael, stay away, you're going to get hurt. I didn't listen. So one day I ran to the ironing board, knocked the hot iron off, and if she hadn't been there to catch it, I'd probably have scars on my face today. So she tells the story better than I do. She said, Michael, out of desperation, I sat you down on the couch and I held out your arm and I took that iron and I brought it really, really close. I mean, so close I could see it in your eyes that you could feel the heat coming off that iron. And about a half inch away, I said, honey, I'm not going to hurt you, but this iron will. Do you understand? Now, I don't remember that incident. I was 2. However, there was a time later in life when one day I walked by my mom's ironing board, and as I always did, if the ironing board was here, I was walking around it. And one day I thought, why do I do that? So Mom told me that story. Wow. Now, I don't know. She told me that story when I was in my 30s. I mean, I was afraid of irons for a long time, and I didn't know why. And I never gave it much thought until one day it just popped in. So I'd actually put that story out of my mind for about 2 decades. And then recently I thought of it and said, you know, there's a metaphor in there. I also had a public speaking hot iron, and it was that desk in first grade. That desk kept me from speaking or being in front of people or standing up in front of groups of any size for a long time. So the metaphor of the hot iron stuck, and that's one of the speeches, the stories I'm working on for my keynote speech is we got to unplug some of those hot irons because they're holding us back.
Yes.
But so it's just memories, just incidents in your life that how can you use it? It took me 58 years to figure out how I could use that story.
Yes. Yes, I was there. And when you delivered that speech, and it was really, I was mesmerized. Like the whole time I was like on the edge of my seat, like listening to you, and it was just wonderful. So
Well, I
anyway.
appreciate that. But you and I'm not unique to that kind of incident. We've all had those moments of humiliation,
Mhm.
fear, lessons learned the hard way. And the earlier in life they are, the better the story is because they have a much deeper emotional impact on us at a younger age.
Yes, yes. Especially under the age of 5, apparently, according
Yes,
to
and I contend that if you're struggling with any issue today, you can trace it back to some lesson learned early in life. Well, guess what? You're not the only one that's going through that. That's the source of a story.
yes. Oh, so following up on this point, then, what would be your best advice? I know we shared a lot of information, but if somebody's listening right this minute, what would be your best advice for someone who is terrified of the thought of public speaking, so of that hot iron, or pushing record on social media platforms like to promote their businesses? What would be your best advice for them?
There's no way around this, Patty, and it's a terrific question. You've just got to do it. Now, before you just, and I know that sounds simplistic, right? Simple message. A couple of ideas to remember. Think back to this theory that human beings were wired to be afraid of speaking because in our early days as a species, that meant death if we were separated and in front of any group of whatever, predators or live other tribes could be trying to kill us. All right, that's in us. We can't change that. What we can do is step back and say, wait a minute. Number one, the worst thing that's going to happen is I'm going to say something. I might be a little embarrassed, but nobody's going to eat me. The audience is today 99.9999% of the people want you to succeed. Is there occasionally a jerk? Absolutely. It happens so rarely. But don't let that hold you back. Third is the people in front of you want something, they want some help. They're sitting in front of you for a reason. They need a piece of advice. They're struggling in some area of your life. They're just like you. They don't want perfection. They want some kind of connection.
Mm.
That's Patricia Fripp. I'd love to take claim for that, but it's brilliance from Patricia. Yeah, they want to connect with you on a human level, especially in this technological area when we've just been locked away from each other for 2 years. We're going to see an explosion because this is March of 2022. We're going to see an explosion in the number of live events coming in, I should say in person, over the next 6 to 9 to 12 months, because not only is it a financial issue, there's a lot of money that's kind of built up and waiting to be spent on these events, but people are desperate to get back together. So they don't care if you make mistakes. As long as you show that you've prepared and you're there for them, mistakes aren't an issue. There's this belief that I have to be perfect up there. You don't. Take it from me, because for the first 7 years of my career, I was afraid. Even once, when I joined Toastmasters for 7 years, Patty, I was afraid of looking unprofessional. I didn't want to be embarrassed, so I thought that meant suit's perfect. Let's see, hair, is it okay? All right, shoes, all right. How do I look? Oh, and I need to memorize every single word of my speech, because if I make a mistake, they're going to see that, oh, he made a mistake. He's not that good. Here's what happened. For 7 years, most of the time I spoke, one piece of advice I consistently got was, Michael, you are so polished. Who? Did you hear that? I'm polished. Yeah, I got this down. For 7 years, right? And then one day, I'm dusting my office, and I got the rag, and I'm shooting the dust on there, and I'm polishing my office, and then I look at this can of polish, just like this, and I said, nothing sticks to polish. Oh my God. nobody's remembering my message because I'm focused on this. And from that day forward, one of the most important questions I ask in an evaluation, what was the message? And I stopped getting the polished response. Like every so often I would get one. And when I hear those words today, I'm thinking, uh-oh, focus is in the wrong place. They're not getting the message. It's not clear. So I'm not going to dress as a slob, but I brush my hair, I put the suit on, and I'm go because I'm there for the audience. And I don't care if I make a few slip-ups because we all do, especially virtually. I mean, that's guaranteed. Something's going to go wrong. Move on. They're not there for your perfection. They want the message that will help make their lives a little bit better.
Yes.
So,
wow.
Longer way to answer this question of fear, but, my son Brendan's 26. When he was in junior high school, he, like all other teenagers, would wonder, oh my gosh, what's Mary going to think of me and Bob and Bill? I said, hey, whoa, time out. Do you know what they're thinking about right now? They're worried about what you think about them. They don't care what you look like today because they're too obsessed with what you think about them. If you can pull back from that, people in the audience, Darren LaCroix taught me this. In every audience we speak to, people are wearing a mask. And I don't mean COVID masks. They're wearing an emotional mask. They're hiding pain, struggle, suffering. Something's going on. Not everybody, but a lot of them are. They're never going to tell you, oh, I'm in pain. What's your message? No, they want something, though. And you will never know 9 times out of 10 who you touch with your message if you're willing to be vulnerable, share a struggle, and just let it out there. Most of the time, you'll never know who you helped, and that's okay. If you're there to serve, it shouldn't matter to you that people run up to you and say, oh my gosh, you're the best speaker. You're so polished. None of that should matter. Just trust that and people will come up to you. But for everyone who does, I'm going to guess there are probably 10 who don't that you had an impact on that will talk about something you shared years after they heard it. Just go with it.
Yes. Wow. Ooh, I feel like I just received the preaching. It was
I did kind of get into that mode, didn't I?
Oh, it was.
And I'm going to tell you what.
Yes, Michael, tell me more. I'm going to rewatch this interview on repeat. It's just so good. Oh, bravo, bravo. Let me contain my enthusiasm. So
No, don't. That's.
Oh, God.
By the way, you are an excellent host, and I'll tell you why. Because first of all, you have a smile that lights up the screen, but you've got this positive energy that encourages people to, all right, go tell them more. So you do a very nice job.
Thank you so much. I'm having such a good time with you. So
Good.
Thank you so much. If this resonates, my energy resonates. So you spend a lot of time with world champions of public speaking, as you just mentioned. This is your circle, your friends at this point.
Yeah.
So what advice, because now we are in the middle of international contests everywhere. And what advice can you share with Toastmasters members to help them on their journey to become memorable storyteller? And I guess you already covered the memorable storytellers, but on their journey to become possibly world champion of public speaking, which is a title that transforms lives, by the way. What would be your advice?
Stop trying to win the world championship of public speaking. I know it's easy to say, but I haven't won it. And I can say it because my mentors, 5 of them, at least 5 are previous world champions. What they said to me is, you can go buy a trophy. You can give yourself a title on a business card. What you want to do is focus on what is that. And Mark Brown, 95 world champion, said, look, you've got 7 minutes to impact lives. What are you going to say? And one of the best exercises he gave Darren, because he coached Darren, who won in 2001. He said, Darren, I want you to imagine that one of your favorite kids or a favorite child is sitting in the 4th row of the audience. What would you say to that child? If you start to think that way, trophies and titles will take care of themselves. Patty, you and I were talking before we started today. when somebody hires me to coach them, I will not let them send me money or hire me if their goal is to win the world championship of public speaking or get 1 million views on TEDx. And the reason I will never do that is we can't control any of that. Imagine if you gave the best speech of your life, and I mean, everybody knew this was a winner, and you just happened to go up against Aaron Beverly, or Darren LaCroix, or Mark Brown, or Muhammad Khatani, who won in 2015. You got no control over that. You also can't control judges. And whether we like it or not, there may be something about you. As soon as you show up on stage, a judge might look at you and you might remind that person of somebody from their lives who mistreated them. You got no control over it. So don't worry about that end result. Go in there and think, I've got a story. I'm going to make this story as good as possible. And the let's say you do win the world championship. That's not the end. That's just the best version that day. Now you've got a speech that you can turn into a keynote. By the way, world championship can change lives, but for most people it doesn't in this sense. You don't become a paid professional because you won the world championship. That's a 7-minute speech. People pay big money for hour-long keynotes, all-day workshops. Now, Mark Brown turned his 7-minute speech into an entire career where he impacted over 1 million kids across North America. So he did it. Darren turned his into a coaching and speaking career. Ed Tate did the same thing. Craig Valentine. But not everybody does. Some people just use the title. And it will, I promise you this, in recent years, if you win or you finish in the top 3 and your video gets out there, you're going to get asked to speak a lot for free. Lot for free, which is okay if you know why you want to do that and you use it as a launching pad. You can hone that speech even more. But just focus on how can I become more effective as a storyteller? How can I get my point out? And how can I impact more lives?
Yes. Thank you for these amazing tips. Noted. And yes, because for the first time, I'm actually competing. And I'm listening to all the guests that I've had on my show that just told Toastmasters, just do it for growth and for fun, exactly what you just said. So I'm just doing it because I got tired of saying that, oh, I've never done it yet. Oh, I'm terrified of it. So now I'm just doing it. And I passed the area level and now I'm at the division. And again, I have zero expectation. And I know who some of my contestants, they're solid speakers. So I'm just going to go out there and give my story and
go do. I'm doing the same thing. I'm competing because I've got the iron story. I'm working on it to get it better, to go into this keynote that I'm developing. Look, if they give me a trophy, you know what it means? I get to go speak to 5 times more people or 10 times more people a month later. It's another opportunity.
Yes. Yes, Mike. Good luck to you.
Yeah, you too.
And what is the next step for Michael Davis now?
It's to continue to get out there and speak. I know in the last 2 years, I've grown tremendously as a speaker. I've had a lot of work with improv, and improv has helped me, but it's just staying on the journey. Never sitting back and thinking, oh, yeah, man, I nailed that speech. I've made it.
Yes.
No, you haven't. George Lucas, because I'm a big Star Wars fan, but George Lucas has one of the best quotes I've ever seen. He said, no movie is ever completely finished. There just comes a day when the studio says, we need the movie. We got to get it into the theaters and start making some money. Right? We don't have that restriction as speakers and storytellers. Every story or every version we give is the best at that point. We can always go make it better. There is a limitless number of audiences that you can share that story with and impact them. And just keep, it's an evolution and it never stops.
Wow.
So to answer your question, I'm just going to keep evolving.
I love it so much. I've never looked at it this way. like a story, because I do realize that we keep tweaking speeches. I thought of it, okay, let me tweak my speech, let me adjust it based on the feedback I receive, but I never saw it as being a never ending. It's like an infinite Netflix episode.
It is.
Amazing.
It really is.
Season.
There's no expiration date. Well, when we expire, I guess, but that's it.
On our deathbed.
But you know what? Because of video, we'll never disappear.
Yes. Wow. Okay, and finally, if someone in the audience would like to know more about you, contact you, or would like to book you for consultation, what is the best way, Michael?
I'm going to just send them to my email address, mike@speakingcpr.com. Mm-hmm. Or if you just want to go to the website, speakingcpr.com. I've got some various resources that are complimentary, no cost or obligation to you. I'd be happy to get those over to you. And I'll actually, we can set up a 15 to 20 minute phone call and just talk about your situation, see how I can best help.
Wonderful. Oh, so many takeaways, Michael. So many. Let me just share a few. Sure. I could go on for like a whole hour, but I will just go with the main one.
Sure.
First things first, look at your library. And that should reveal what you need to consider doing with your life. So if you're not doing what you want to read, maybe consider. Do some soul searching. Keep your stories simple. No matter what you do, keep it simple. If you're afraid to speak, just do it. And nobody is going to eat you if you speak. That was a classic. And two more. People in front of you need your help. They're just like you. And from Patricia Fripp, they don't want perfection, they want connection. And the last one, which is the best one for me, nothing sticks to polish.
Take the polish off.
Yeah, take it off. So any parting words or your last story you'd like to share with us, Michael?
Yes, you have a story. You have stories in you. You have life experiences. And where I learned this was from my mother. Mom was born into German-occupied France during World War II. Her earliest memories are every day. They would wake up. My grandparents, her and my aunt would wake up. And whereas most of us, we ask, well, what are we going to eat today? Their question was, are we going to eat today? So Grandma and Grandpa would bundle up the little girls. They would walk them about a half mile into the near village, and they would wait for the German supply trucks to come in to feed the soldiers. And if they were lucky on a good day, they might pick up a couple potatoes that fell on the road. Mm. At night, there were blackout conditions because there were air raids almost every night. And most nights, the air raid sirens would go off. Grandma and Grandpa would grab their two little girls, take them down 22 steps across the big parking lot into a bomb shelter. Night after night, week after month, after 3.5 years. So my mother was telling me this while we were sitting in the comfort of my home in Cincinnati, Ohio, a mile from a 24-hour grocery store. Patty, I couldn't conceive of what she was saying. Mm-hmm. And all I could say to her was, Mom, how did Grandma and Grandpa do that? How did all the people in France do that during the occupation? She looked at me for a long time. She finally said, well, honey, that's just what we did to survive. It took me a while to understand what she was saying was, that was my life. I've lived it. No big deal to me. I'm here. You and I, and if you're watching this, you have a story. Maybe you didn't live in an occupied country. That's not the point. The point is you've gone through tough times in life. And if you dig under those tough times, you're going to find a common emotional connection with people who can benefit from your experience. How did you get through it? What were the steps you took? How did you change your mindset to get where you are today, to survive that ordeal? That's why you have a story, and actually several stories that people need to hear. Develop them, get help. And I'm not saying you have to run and get a coach, but get somebody to help you uncover, because you and I are too close to our own stories. We don't see the value in them. Other people will. But just keep reaching out, develop them, evolve them, and you will have a lasting impact on others.
Wow. That's the only word I can say right now. Just wow. And I cannot wait to rewatch this interview all over again.
Good. Well, keep
Wow.
lighting up that the screen with your smile, and I like how you did a recap at the end. That's a Mark Brown trick on those interviews.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. So nicely done. You're a really good host.
Thank you so much. What a pleasure it has been to talk with you, Michael. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Sure. Yeah.
And
Let me know when this comes out.
yes, I will. Not you'll be the first to know. And dear friend, thank you for watching. I hope you feel encouraged to just do it. And I will leave you with this. The power of your voice can change the world. Find it and use it. See you in the next video. Bye.